It's just so hard for women to orgasm during sex. Who here has heard it before? I know I have. I've heard it from young women in their 20s just starting to explore their sexuality, from women in their 50s and 60s who've been married, raised children, and lived full lives. Different ages, experiences, and choices. But one thing they all have in common is that they share this in private, in moments of vulnerability. And they feel like something is wrong with them, like they're broken or flawed. And I mean, in a way, it's not that far off. The numbers do show a gap. Around 33% of heterosexual women always orgasm during sex, versus 75% of men. Usually always is 65 versus 95%. And we take these numbers and these stories at face value, and we treat them as evidence that this is just how things are, how women are. But what if I told you that this isn't a biological truth? It's a cultural one. Let's start with something simple, yet surprisingly misunderstood: the vulva. Many people still refer to the entire external female genitalia as the vagina, when in fact the correct term is vulva. In Icelandic, the word for vulva is pika. Yet many people, especially from older generations, struggle to say it, and they might use other words instead, like butta, which means a small coin purse. Now, this isn't just a linguistic oversight. It's a reflection of how little we are taught and how much we are discouraged from talking about this part of the body. Why? Somewhere along the way, we were taught subtly and persistently that the vulva is something to be ashamed of. And these messages are everywhere. They're in the way we whisper about menstruation and hide our period products. They're in the perfumed hygiene products marketed towards women and their vulva, sending the message that our natural scent must be masked. They're in the lack of representation of real, diverse vulvas, leaving many people thinking theirs is abnormal or even shameful. But why am I talking about shame when this talk is supposed to be about pleasure? Because shame is the barrier to exploring and learning about what our bodies are capable of, especially when it comes to pleasure. Unfortunately, most of us didn't get sex education that included pleasure. If anything, it was more like that scene in Mean Girls. Don't have sex because you will get pregnant and die. Where sex education was rooted in fear and shame. But pleasure, that was usually left out of the conversation, at least for girls, while boys got to learn about their erections, ejaculation, and orgasm. On top of that, many of us with vulvas learned early about pain related to sex. Like in this textbook, currently used in Icelandic schools, which describes first-time intercourse. It says that the hymen might tear and pain and bleeding might occur. It goes on to suggest that this is due to the body not being warmed up enough or the muscles being too tight. And this is something that usually goes away with time or when the person gains more confidence. However, what most of us learned about the rupture of the hymen during first intercourse is a myth. And that will be a whole other TED Talk to dismantle that one. Sex education should center pleasure. We should be telling everyone that sex should feel good, and unwanted pain should never be expected or accepted as just a part of the experience. That if it hurts, they can and should ask their partners to stop. Not that pain is something that goes away when enough time has passed or when they're more confident. Which brings me back to the myth I mentioned at the start. It's just so hard for women to orgasm during sex. This myth that patriarchy has taught us has quietly shaped what we think about female pleasure. It's the idea that there's just something about their bodies that makes it harder for women to orgasm, that it's biological and unchangeable. When we actually look at the anatomy, we see something very different from the story we've been told. And let's start with the clitoris, which plays a significant role in orgasm, and most people with vulvas need direct stimulation to the clitoris to do so. The internal structure of the penis and clitoris is nearly identical, and they even both get erections. Remember, though, that genitals exist on a spectrum, and these pictures do not represent that variety. The clitoris actually contains more than 10,000 nerve fibers that send messages about touch and pressure to the brain. And if you're thinking, wait, wasn't it 8,000? You're right. There was the number presented as a fact, but that number was based on research done on cows. Yes, you heard me right. Cows. Yet this was presented as it had been based on research done on humans. The research on the clitoris in humans is so far behind, with 20 times more research done on the penis glands. And it wasn't until 2022 that we finally got accurate numbers on the nerve fibers in the clitoris in humans. Now, it's not just about one magic button out there. It's also what's happening in here. The CUV complex, built from the words clitoris, urethra, and vagina. It's a network, not separate parts, but interconnected structures that work together. It's about how they respond to pressure, touch, and arousal. It's complex, yes, but it's not broken, and it's definitely not a biological flaw. Don't believe me just yet? Remember when I said that around 65% of heterosexual women and 95% of men usually always orgasm during sex? Well, what if I told you that this number is 86% for lesbian women? And then 92% of women reach orgasm easily and regularly during masturbation. As you can probably tell by now, the issue isn't anatomy. It's stigma, silence, and shame. And shame is an effective teacher. When we experience shame, pleasure can start to feel like something that isn't meant for us, like something we don't deserve. And we learn shame related to our bodies and sexuality from a very early age. And I'm not just talking about when we become teens, but as young as infants. And I know some people feel queasy when I say infants and sexuality in the same sentence. But sexuality isn't inherently sexual in the ways we adults usually think about it. Sexuality is a broad, complex term. It's biological, psychological, physical, and social, to name just a few layers. It's what we learn about consent and boundaries, and what sexual thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are appropriate, and what is unacceptable. Some of the things we learn about sexuality we learn in a formal setting, and some are implicit messages from our communities. Yet they all shape our internal values and beliefs around sexuality. An example of this is from a very young age, girls are shamed in ways boys often aren't. Like when toddler girls are more likely to be punished for something perfectly normal, like touching their own genitals. With boys, this behavior usually isn't punished, just ignored. When girls grow up, the double standards become even clearer. If they show too much skin or have multiple partners, they're often labeled as sluts. When boys grow up to do the same, they're praised, called players. If girls don't show any interest in dating or sex, or don't show enough skin, they are prudes. This impossible double bind teaches girls and women that no matter what they do, their sexuality is a problem. And these gendered scripts impact all of us. Far too many people are victims of sexual abuse, with trans and non-binary people far more likely to be victims than their cisgender counterparts. Boys and men have to tackle unrealistic ideals of masculinity, which often means suppressing emotions and vulnerability. Trans and non-binary people are often shamed for who they are, in a world where their gender identity and expression is constantly questioned, doubted, or dismissed, and they face discrimination, exclusion, and far too often even violence. Then we have the sexual script, which is the way we've been taught to think about what sex is supposed to look like, what we should and should not enjoy, desire, or even fantasize about. This sexual script is quite heterosexual, and it centers the penis and pleasure for men, where what usually brings others pleasure is called foreplay, before the real sex, which is intercourse. And these scripts impact all of us and limit our ability for pleasurable sexual experiences. But the shame I've been talking about isn't just about sex. It's wrapped around our entire relationship with our bodies and ourselves and causes a disconnect. We have learned that we have to earn pleasure, earn rest, earn feeling good. Want to buy yourself some new clothes? Lose weight first. Need rest? Why? Don't be lazy. Want to enjoy a donut? Make sure you hit the gym. But when we start making room for pleasure in all areas of our lives, we start making room for sexual pleasure too. And after having taught about pleasure for more than a decade, I've lost count of the number of people who thought they were the only one struggling. The only one who couldn't orgasm and thought there was something wrong with them. The only one that had fantasies that they assumed were not normal. The only one who felt that just the idea of looking at her own vulva was shameful. The only one who couldn't enjoy oral sex because they were afraid of how they might look, taste, or smell. The only one who blamed themselves for losing interest in sex when the sex that they had been having wasn't pleasurable for them. But they were never the only one. And in these moments, I see something else too. I see hope. The kind that comes from realizing you're not alone. Because shame is an institution of control. An institution which thrives when we stay silent and shatters when we challenge its rules and start to share, question, and unlearn. When we meet ourselves and others with vulnerability, curiosity, and compassion, we make space for confidence, connection, and joy. I want to encourage you all to reclaim pleasure in all its forms by prioritizing it and embracing it, by redefining what pleasure can look like. And please, to just eat the donut and enjoy it guilt-free.